This episode of the Construction Record is brought to you by the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. Clean water is everybody's business.
Hello everybody, it's digital media editor Warren Fry from the Journal of Commerce, and I'm here with
Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce.
And here specifically is a Canadian Concrete Expo, where I've been attending a few different sessions about concrete, as you might assume. Vince, what have you been up to?
Well, been taking care of things back at the office. We've had you out here, which has been exciting. We had Angela Gismondi out here, joining you the first day of the Expo. We were excited to be attending this and covering it. It's the first time in a long time. So it's really good to connect with this sector in the construction industry, and I'm excited to see the stories you and Angela are going to generate and some of the video and podcast interviews you guys have collected. Back in the Markham office, it's busy times, even though it's the beginning of the year. Both Don and Angela have been on top of all of Monty McNaughton's appearances at the Ministry of Labour. They've really been pushing how they're going to be trying to attract more apprentices and underrepresented groups into construction. And they've been doing a bit more of a dog and pony tour, different events across Ontario. And we've been covering some of those. We have Don Wall out at today at the Hamilton and Halton Construction Association's Economic Outlook. We'll be getting some stories out of that. We have our upcoming features in both the JOC and the DCN this month on occupational health and safety. Some really great stories looking at issues from mental health to training to slip and falls. So if you're interested in OH&S and construction, definitely keep an eye out for the end of the month when we'll be releasing those features.
Okay, and as for what I've been doing here, yesterday I went to something called Payment Delays and Other Challenges for Canada's Construction Industry. Eric Cote from the GACA explained how prompt payment has been adopted here in Ontario and how in Quebec it's getting there, and in Alberta and Saskatchewan various conditions are leading to it getting into that place. So I interviewed him, and you'll hear that interview later in this podcast. And I also went to yesterday the How Will the BC Operator Certification Program Affect You? And that was hosted by Ammar, I'm going to get this wrong, Kavazovic, who I interviewed as well. He's a program manager for the BC Construction Safety Alliance, and Charles Kelly, who's the president of Great Northern Management Consultants. So I interviewed the two of them, and Charles is interesting because Charles was sort of the brain trust behind getting this thing done, because he had the work experience sort of at a theoretical level, and then at the practical boots on the ground level, that was Ammar, and he's running the program right now. And this is the first program in North America that's like a certified pump operator program, just because the industry, you'll hear this in an interview, it was one of those cases where the industry wanted things regulated more than anybody else did, and so they took it upon themselves to do that. I also talked to Angela, and in a little while we'll have a little sort of segment where she talks about what she covered here. But anyway, back to what are some of the pressing concerns that we're covering in the next few weeks in the DCN?
With the DCN, we have a couple of different things on the go, as always, with the daily paper, right? We have some kind of feature profile articles of late on Diamond Schmidt's architects, a couple of different projects of theirs. One in particular, DSA, Diamond Schmidt, has been selected for the renovation of the David Geffen Hall in New York City. So that's pretty exciting. We have that profile. We also have a profile on the Marinsky project in St. Petersburg that DSA was involved in. Don Wall's written that. That's going to be coming up. And it's still kind of ongoing still with the apprenticeship and training and labor issues. More than anything else, we're seeing a lot of different groups now coming out to the fore. I think there's a lot of energy and momentum, it seems, here in Ontario to try addressing the skills gap. So we'll be looking at stories not just from the construction angle, from the construction sector angle, but there's also educators like George Brown College that have approached us, and we're kind of exploring different story threads like that. It's an exciting time of the year right now. Even though it's January, February, I'm kind of amazed at kind of the hard news that's out there that we're covering. So we'll be on top of some of those stories. And of course, I'd be remiss to say you and I are going to keep pushing with our preparation to ConExpo in March. We're in the process right now trying to line up at least one feature interview, if not two, with officials from ConExpo. And you and I have been kind of mining our way down the schedule, how we're going to cover this massive show.
There's a lot.
Yeah, like we were hoping the Concrete Expo here that you're at it's almost like a pilot, a little bit of of how we can cover ConExpo, but it's just so massive.
It's huge. Like I've been to that conference, not that conference itself, but that conference building for another conference, and it's a lot of walking, so, which means a lot of content.
Yeah, and like every time I talk to a ConExpo official, that's what they keep reminding me is like, wear comfortable shoes, Vince, and remember to hydrate, and and you're not going to get to everything, so have a plan. So I think that's our interesting challenge for you and I, like, what is our plan editorially, right? Like I have an idea of some segments and some demonstrations, let's say, some demos or some press conferences that we're getting a heads up on to attend. But how do we cover all that just to you and I will be quite the challenge. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah, we'll do it, of course.
Yeah, we'll do it.
We always do.
Yeah, but it'll be an interesting one to dive into.
Okay, so with the magic of podcast time travel, let's go backwards in time, but forwards in the program to talk to myself and Angela.
Thank you, everyone.
Both staff writer Angela Gismondi and myself are at the Canadian Concrete Expo, and Angela just stepped out of 2 different sessions, so she's going to tell us about what she heard and what the issues were in those sessions.
So I was in a session called Concrete Delivery Professional, a concrete investment in your business future, and it was hosted by Pam Woodman, the executive director of the Atlantic Concrete Association. She basically talked about a program which was introduced in 2019 by the association, and it's an online version of the Concrete Delivery Professional course. So the presentation just focused on why it's important to educate drivers and what kind of things the program will cover, including product knowledge, environment, safety, maintenance, and customer service, and how that can help your business save money and promote better safety procedures.
Cool. And what was the other session?
The second session I was in today was called UHPC 20 Years Later. So it was hosted by a representative from Lafarge, and it was on ultra high performance concrete. So it was first used in North America in 1997, and today it's mostly used in bridge construction, bridge repair. So he talked about some of the different examples of the usage. It's more commonly used in the United States, and he just went through a bunch of examples of where and how it's used for the audience.
Okay, great. And I talked to Eric Cote from the GCAC, and you're going to hear that interview coming up right now.
This feature interview is brought to you by the Greater Toronto Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association, building water and sewer infrastructure excellence since 1957.
I'm here with
Eric Cote. I'm Vice Chair for GCAC and CEO from the CGQ, Quebec's Association of General Contractors.
And we're at the Canadian Concrete Expo, and Eric just gave a talk about sort of a prompt payment update. And last time I talked to you was a couple years ago, and Ontario had just passed or was about to pass the legislation. Now we've had a year or a couple of years to look at what the results have been, and maybe you could sort of go into that.
Yeah, well, the pressure from Ontario's model being adopted and in full power, gives pressure on the other. Federal government has gone through. They're doing the regulations, so we're getting probably an update during this year of all the full power. We hope at the latest in 2021. Pilot projects in Quebec are going well. Government is talking about speeding up the process to get a law also, and other provinces are getting and jumping on the ballot and making sure that prompt payment is important. And owners are more and more understanding the needs of contractors, not only GCs, but subcontractors and all the specialties, and also the suppliers, that prompt payment is not good for the business.
And you mentioned that in Quebec, the Charbonneau Commission is kind of what jump-started the whole prompt payment thing. Was that before Ontario or after or was it kind of in continuity with Ontario going to its new model?
The study in Ontario was out, and actually the Quebec coalition pushed for the issue to be addressed at the Charbonneau Commission. Okay. So we were aware that something was going on in Ontario. We started discussing the situation. Just say that Charbonneau Commission was not asking these questions, but then all the shortage of money from a contractor's perspective could be a risk for corruption, stuff like that. So Charbonnet Commission thought it was a good idea to put it in,
Right.
and saw that it was coming up in other provinces and other legislation.
And you said one of the differences is it's a 30-day thing in Ontario, and it's a lot cheaper. So they seem to go to adjudicators quicker, and they're a little more gun shy to go to adjudicators in Quebec.
We don't know if they're actually going, but the process is making sure that it's available for low level. For all levels of organization. So this is quite interesting. We're pushing for the same model in Quebec since we are in the process of adopting that. So we're hoping for a Quebec model to be available and to be affordable for all parties. Large GC can afford these kind of expenditures, but for small subcompanies it might be too difficult and might not go for it. And the large the amount of the bill will make a difference. So if it's a smaller service available, it's probably useful for someone.
And you said there's more progress being made in Saskatchewan, and I guess
BC.
reason for hope in Alberta, even though they haven't said anything yet.
Well, pressure is coming from the other regions that have adopted. So Alberta is looking at it in a point of view for themselves, but seeing that it's available elsewhere. So we're trying to push this reality that it doesn't hurt, at least, and it makes situation much more easier to settle than going to courts, because all the courts in all provinces have problem with construction issues. If we remove, this is less pressure on the judicial system to handle other more important issues that we can resolve in a better way, easier way.
And you said as of yet there's no federal adjudication sort of authority, but there are ones at the provincial level, at least I guess in Ontario.
Yeah, well, it's a private company in Ontario, so we're looking forward to see what's going to happen at the federal government. We know they're discussing with all provinces working on that, so there's not a prompt payment alliance with the government, but they're trying to settle a model that is simple to understand, and it's effective also to make the decision. So it's in the government's court, and with the new mandate, a new government, a new minister in Paris, GCC will probably go down in Ottawa very soon to find out what's the intention of the new minister, and if wants to push the calendar up to get in time for 2021.
And you said GCAC is it's a reason for being as prompt payment, so maybe you could go into how you guys have been advocating.
Well, we were born on that issue, and we felt lots of issues are important for GCs, but prompt payment was one. We were underrepresented at the federal level. We were not active in all provinces, and we felt important that mixed trades associations are very good, for networking and stuff like that. But when it's time to talk about specific issues for GCs, we have it in Quebec, we have it in Ontario. Saskatchewan is a smaller association, but we see the difference, and GC sees the effort. So everybody has recognized that a GC association, as the same way there's a National Trades Coalition, also has their place and their voice to be heard in the process.
And do you think that there's a shift in coming, and is Ontario the instigator of that, or is it just that this has had to happen eventually?
You mean prompt payment?
Yeah, prompt payment, moving to this sort of new model that we hadn't moved to until now.
I think we were late on adopting that, and we have to find out about the economy. Everything's going crazy a bit and active, but I think it was necessary because more and more people were being affected by it, and it affects the economy, and the government understood that. So in a way, public contracts as an impulse on the economy, and stalled payments doesn't help the efforts of the government to make sure that these have an impact on the economy. So in a way, government is fixing something that we were trying to make it better. So in a way, it all works out for everyone.
And just as a final thing, you said there are still challenges, and the labor shortage being one of them, but there are other ones as well.
Well, labor shortage is a problem everywhere. We have a study was made from Raymond Chabot in Quebec saying that we're going to need 20,000 people for the next 10 years every year. So it means a lot of people. So
which makes it that much more complicated.
Much more complicated, and the prices are getting higher too. They're talking about I don't say réchauffement, you should say. That was a problem, and we call it effervescence, of the market. So prices are going high. So this is not good. Government doesn't like that. He wants the money for their projects to be well spent, not for overhead and stuff he doesn't want and need. So this is a problem too. Technology. We are so late in technology, and smaller firms are not in there. Are not in the process. Not everyone will go BIM. Here at the event, we have companies that are there, Maestro, Procore. There are other alternatives. As CGQ, we're working to evaluate the technological maturity of companies and help them, because some companies might not need the whole Shazam of technology. Little things could help them be more productive and more effective, and that's what we're here to helping to achieve.
Which in effect has them pay quicker. So
yeah. You used to buy a plotter that was worth $10,000, a large plan printer, and then people had an association buy them, and people will go there. You don't even need that anymore. You got a tablet and you can examine the plans there. You could have it on a large screen TV and stuff like that. So technology is evolving, innovations. We have to make place to innovation, and the owners have to open themselves to innovation. So as the planners, the engineers, and the architects too. So we have to work together to do these things to make this industry more productive, more effective. And it's being done elsewhere, so we have to follow through. So Canada is late, and we have to catch up, and other countries are doing it. So, or else we're going to have these companies come up and organize our projects with their machine and their technology. So rise up, Canada! We have to do it.
Okay. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and up next we have an interview I did with Ammar Kavazovic. He's the program manager for the BC Construction Safety Alliance, and with Charles Kelly. He's the president of Great Northern Management Consultants. Between the two of them, they've worked out a new certification that's going to be North America-wide, or at least to apply North America-wide, for concrete pump operators. Charles did all these, or a lot of the theoretical work, sort of laying the groundwork for this program, and then Ammar is sort of the boots on the ground. He implements it now at the BCCSA. So without any delay, here's that interview. I'm here at the Concrete Expo with
Charles Kelly, the former president of Concrete BC and now an advisor to the BC Construction Safety Alliance.
And
I am Ammar Kavazovic. I'm the program manager for the Certified Concrete Pump Operator program at the BC Construction Safety Alliance.
And we've just been talking about that very program, and so I'll start with Charles. He gave some of the history of sort of the struggle to get this happening, because concrete pump operating didn't have sort of the regulatory framework, and still doesn't have the regulatory framework that, but they're working towards that. So maybe you could go into some of the details.
Well, there is a regulatory framework in CSA Z151/2009, which was primarily led by WorkSafe BC about a decade ago, and they incorporated most of what's in that standard into BC's regulation. What they didn't do, and it wasn't there at the time, it was primarily a manufacturer standard, and it was silent on operator requirements. And so I think the big change that got triggered by a number of deaths in the industry at the CSA was to establish operator requirements, and then again delineate the responsibilities of the other key actors associated with the delivery and pumping and placing the concrete.
And one thing I find interesting about your talk is that not that the industry doesn't want to be safe, but this was driven by the industry more than anybody else.
This was driven by the industry. It was industry leadership. And it was industry leadership in both originally advocating for safety training, and then this push to build a competency certification program came from the concrete industry, but it was supported by all of the other key players and contractors across the board in the construction industry. So it was a industry-led and industry-designed, and all the subject matter expertise came from concrete pump companies or certification professionals.
And a question for both of you, since you have to apply these and you've worked to get this to happen, it goes to an international standard, and it's meant to be portable, that anybody you guys will be sort of the ones administering it, or not administering it, but sort of overseeing it, and then other people will be able to administer it because it's at an ANSI and ISO standard?
Well, I think the key variable there is portability. And I mean, once you get certified, as a competent concrete pump operator, you don't have to go back and do that certification again. You have to go back every 5 years and take a safety test, because things change and people, they need to be reminded of safety. So once every 5 years is particularly onerous to maintain a professional accreditation. But this ticket would mean that, right now, there's no competing certifications. Well, there's a bunch of, paper certifications that don't mean anything. But this is essentially portable, and you can take this to Alberta, Ontario, and eventually into the United States. So it's a major issue to raise the level of operator to a professional level, and to be seen and recognized as for both a recruitment and status point of view, that this is a recognized profession, and they should be accorded the equal respect that's associated with that.
And Ammar, you're the boots on the ground for this, so how do you implement this?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now, as far as British Columbia is concerned, we are using our partners that we've used throughout the development of the program to basically market it. We've garnered a lot of industry support already, so British Columbia is not as much of a challenge for us now because, in fact, the regulator has supported it, the industry asked for it, so they know what it is, they know it's coming, and likely in the near future it'll become a mandatory regulated certification. What we're doing in the rest of Canada, and what we're here for today to a large degree, is to educate individuals and companies on the new standard that we've developed and on the certification program itself, and then really use them as marketing partners. So like Charles was mentioning, it's a national standard, it's an international standard really, because it's built to an ISO standard. And what we really need now is just folks to understand what it is, how it operates, to know that the BCCSA will remain the scheme owner, so we will administer the program, but within their individual jurisdictions, we effectively need regional partners in order to bring the program forward and be accepted by industry and regulators alike in those jurisdictions.
And I heard one comment from one of the people viewing the session was that where everybody perked up was how much it costs and how you do it. So maybe you could go into that if you're, say, some guy who's a concrete pump operator. How does he get this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the entire program is effectively administered online. So all of our assessment techniques and our tools and instruments are online. So what you would do is go on to the ccpo.ca website, then navigate from there to the CCPO portal. You create a user account, and then it flows through a fairly standard set of questions that you have to answer as a user. You would make your payments there. For our written exam component, it is either online proctored or proctored through a test center physically. The exam cost is $250 if it's online proctored through your own computer or a computer at a library or something like that. If you elect to take the test center exam, then it's $350 for that. The written exam is valid for 12 months, so you have a full year from taking your written exam and passing it to move forward to do your practical assessment. Now, the practical assessments are handled by a third party that we've contracted out to do that work for us. The exam cost for those would be $1,500 a piece. We have 5 different types of pumps that you can be certified to. Those are the truck-mounted boom pumps, either over or under 41 meters, the tower placing boom, and the high and low pressure line pumps, which comprise the 5 total pump types. So what happens after you pay for your practical assessment is our third-party assessment agency actually contacts you directly and then schedules for one of their assessors to come out to your site and to actually observe you operating the pump. So it's not a disruption to the worker or the company really to have to stop their operations to send somebody off to a test center to take the practical exam. In fact, we come to you, observe you in a real live scenario, and just make you go through the entire process of setup to cleanup for whatever level of pump you're being certified to.
The thing to sort of understand when it comes to the price, it's really a factor of time, because they're essentially testing, work in process, so the examiner has to be there for the setup. Mm-hmm. And then they've got to be doing the actual pumping, and a bunch of tests associated, and then they got to be there for cleanup, which is a complex exercise in itself, and before they hit the road again. So the test times can be 6 hours or more. So that's why it's just the reality of this. But it's an extremely low price to get a professional accreditation that has recognized to an international standard. That's a pretty reasonable price overall.
And finally, a question for both of you. It was mentioned that you look out on the trade floor and there's all these new technology, new equipment. So this thing has to be adaptable, and sort of what's built in and what's looking forward to adapt to the new technology that you're seeing coming forward.
Well, I think the nature of how the program has been built, it goes through an annual assessment of the examinations, which is based on the statistical analysis of how people did in the test, but also if there's new technology added, that would be the place to do it, and we've got to change the question because something has changed. I mean, we just saw today a brand new Puttmeister high pressure line pump that is new to the market. And it has a number of elements to it that would require, some adjustments to our high pressure line pump examination. So that's going to continue to happen. It's because it's designed to be updatable and flexible. The only difference is you just don't change it because of change it. You've got to go through a process where a consensus industry experts have to review, what it is you're proposing or what the technology is, and then how do you intend to test that. What are the new questions or what are the new examinations for the practical? So it's designed, the key in this is, as Ammar was saying, is all this is in your policies and procedures. And I mean, at one level, this isn't necessarily rocket science. It's prodigious. That's what it is. And it has to be demonstrated to be, be done in a valid way and documented at every step. And that's what Ammar's job is to manage all of that.
Yeah, and I would echo much of what Charles said there. Really what we lean on in order to have our reviews and to have our updates, if needed, on any part of whether it be the practical assessment or the written assessment, is the subject matter experts. So the folks that helped us develop this thing and continue to review it and continue to scrutinize the program as they should, with new equipment being introduced, like Charles mentioned. Even now, I imagine that by this time next year, we will have to have at least one question on one portion of one of the exams that will address that type of equipment, because if it's being used in the field, then we have to ensure that those individuals using them are qualified and competent to do so.